Now, I'm not one to gossip, but I will bring you the tea. Welcome to Chronicle Speaks.
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes.
Look at you.
Jay-Z is likely still celebrating his victory, especially given the fact that the almost career-ending lawsuit filed against him and Diddy by a Jane Doe who claimed the two stars took advantage of her when she was 13 years old was dismissed with prejudice, meaning it could never be brought up again. Now, your boy Jay-Z isn't just taking this victory in stride, he's unleashing the beast on the attorney who fought hard to prove Jay-Z's guilt. Now, according to Jay and his attorneys, the Jane Doe eventually revealed to Tony Buzbee, who's her attorney, that her story wasn't true, but Buzbee allegedly advised her to go along with it so they could both receive a payday. Now, Jay's legal team has conducted a deep dive into the alleged Jane Doe's past and found that she had made 3 previous essay allegations that were later dropped or dismissed in court. According to them, it appears that she's suffering from personal and a financial hardship. She recently lost custody of her children, and her parents, who on information and belief support Doe, recently filed for bankruptcy protection. Less than 90 days before sending the demand letter, Doe had been in court on mental health related issues in connection with her second-degree assault charges, and her bail was revoked for failing a drug test. Yet Buzbee was okay with putting her on national TV to interview in front of the world, spewing out allegations that she previously told Buzbee was a lie, but they decided to go along with it, and now Jay-Z is suing both Doe and Buzbee. We are going to get into this story and so much more, but before we do, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss out on any news regarding this story and so much more. Now let's get back into it. Attorney Tony Buzbee has filed lawsuit after lawsuit against Sean Combs, and we reviewed over a dozen of them on this channel. But with the way things are looking and the way they're saying Tony Buzbee is moving out here in these legal streets, these lawsuits are starting to carry as much credence as a paper umbrella in a downpour. Now, speaking on downpours, Jay-Z is making it rain on Buzbee and the Jane Doe who falsely accused him of taking advantage of her alongside Diddy in 2000 when she was 13 years old. Now, while the woman withdrew the lawsuit with prejudice, the damage caused to Jay by the lawsuit is just too much to simply shake hands on and walk away from peacefully. Now, Jay told Buzbee, "Before, I look forward to showing you just how different I am," and he is keeping true to his word. Now, he has filed a defamation lawsuit against Buzbee and the Jane Doe, claiming that the two made false and defamatory statements about him for financial gain. Let's dive into these allegations. False, malicious, strategically and tactically calculated and timed to inflict maximum pain and suffering on Mr. Carter, and in conspiracy with multiple attorneys, including defendants Anthony Buzbee and David Fortney, who like her were soullessly motivated by greed and abject disregard of the truth and the most fundamental prospects of human decency. These are the only truthful and fair description of Jane Doe and her lawyer's malevolent efforts to assassinate the impeccable and lifetime earned character of Sean Corey Carter, who is professionally known as Jay-Z, but more importantly is known as dad and husband and son, and a human being who did nothing to deserve or elicit the wanton, depraved attack that Jane Doe, in conspiracy with her lawyers, launched to extort Mr. Carter beginning on November 5th, 2024 through a menacing private demand letter. Doe and her lawyers, Anthony Buzbee, David Fortney, Anthony G. Buzbee LP, and the Buzbee law firm, collectively known as the defendants, then brought before the world an in-court complaint, the impossibility and indeed absurdity of which was surpassed only by its vile malevolence, in a desperate attempt to leverage Mr. Carter into an extortionate payoff, which these malicious actors presented as the only path for Mr. Carter to prevent the public prosecution of a lawsuit by Doe. Their initial extortionate demand letter failed to yield the financial windfall they sought, and after Doe told Buzbee, with whom she had never spoken before the demand letter was drafted and sent, that Mr. Carter did not SA her, Buzbee pushed her towards going forward with the false story against Mr. Carter to make the case better and get them, her and her attorneys, more money. Specifically, Buzbee brought Jay-Z into it. Buzbee then went forward with naming Mr. Carter with full knowledge by him, as imparted to him by Doe, that Mr. Carter had never assaulted Doe, and Doe's entire story as it related to Mr. Carter was completely fabricated. Doe has now voluntarily admitted directly to representatives of Mr. Carter that the story brought before the world in court and on global television was just that, a false, malicious story. She has admitted that Mr. Carter did not assault her and that indeed it was Buzbee himself whom she met for the first time at a coffee shop in Houston on the day of her maliciously false NBC News interview, which is discussed in detail below, who pushed her to go forward with the false narrative of the assault by Mr. Carter in order to leverage a maximum payday. To compound the egregious harm, just last Friday, Buzbee and Fortney, co-counsel, a prominent New York attorney, in the now dismissed false actions against Mr. Carter, threatened Mr. Carter's counsel to double down with yet another false public statement by Doe if Mr. Carter publicly revealed her admissions and Buzbee and Fortney's misdeeds in Mr. Carter's pending California lawsuit against Buzbee. Fortunately and clearly unexpectedly from their perspective, Doe, Buzbee, and Fortney were met with nothing but righteous resolve at every turn by Mr. Carter. He stood steadfast, publicly decried the lies being put forth against him, and beat the evil conspiracy among malicious Doe and her malevolent, soulless lawyers, driving them back into the shadows from which they came, resulting in the voluntary dismissal with prejudice without settlement of their false and malicious complaint on February 14, 2025. Mr. Carter does not commence this action lightly. Following Jane Doe's admission that she fabricated her claims against Mr. Carter, her lawyers have continued to seek to hide this reality, including through further extortionate threats and demands by Buzbee, Fortney, and their New York co-counsel on February 28th. Even after all this, Mr. Carter does not expose his malicious and wrongful accuser's identity in this complaint, seeking to maintain her anonymity as Doe. But the extortion and abuse of Mr. Carter by Doe and her lawyers must stop. Therefore, Mr. Carter brings this lawsuit to hold Doe accountable for her will for defamation per se and her malicious prosecution of knowingly false allegations against Mr. Carter that Doe and her co-conspirator attorneys have falsely and maliciously peddled. Now, according to Jay-Z and his attorneys, Doe appears to be facing financial and personal struggles, and she hired Buzbee's law firm to falsely accuse Mr. Carter of SA in an attempt to extort money from him. Now, she recently lost custody of her children, and her parents, who upon information and belief support her, recently filed for bankruptcy protection. Now, desperate to obtain a payday, Doe hired the Buzbee law firm, which has a long history of whipping up media frenzy with vague and sensationalized claims against public figures to extort payments from Mr. Carter under the threat of devastating harm to his reputation. Doe had already faced legal troubles before, including mental health issues and past dismissed SA charges. Now, Buzbee and Fortney, who represented her, didn't investigate her background, which would have shown these issues. Doe first tried to extort Mr. Carter with a demand letter and an anonymous lawsuit. When that didn't work, she filed a formal lawsuit with false allegations and later defamed him publicly on television. Jay-Z and his attorneys continue to state that all of Doe's claims against Mr. Carter have been proven false. For example, she said the assault occurred at a private residence, but Mr. Carter was actually at a nightclub in New York at the time, and the news investigation also confirmed this. Additionally, Doe's initial claims that she spent 20 minutes in a limo before arriving at the residence, but later admitted that she didn't know where she was going or how long the drive took. She also falsely claimed to have had a conversation with Benji Madden, but it was revealed that neither Benji nor his band were at the event she described. Furthermore, her father denied even picking her up after the event, and there are no houses matching her description near the venue. There are numerous other inconsistencies in her story, such as her claims about the VMA's events, which were contradicted by the broadcast and the NYPD. She also couldn't have approached the celebrities' limousines, as she said, since they were blocked off by barricades. After NBC presented her with these contradictions, Doe admitted to making mistakes and conceded that she had been guessing about many of the details. Despite this, she refused to drop the lawsuit and even suggested taking a polygraph test, though no test ever occurred. Jay-Z goes on to say that Buzbee had signed the complaints in the action against Mr. Carter without being submitted to the bar of the United States District Court of the Southern District of New York as required. When the judge presiding over the case was advised of this fact, she issued an order dated January 28, 2025, requiring Buzbee to file proof of admission to the SDNY on the docket by February 14, 2025, which is exhibit number 6. The very next day, January 29, 2025, Buzbee applied for such admission. On February 13, 2025, one day before his deadline to file proof of admission in the SDNY, Buzbee got the news that because he had already filed pleadings in the SDNY, without being admitted to the bar of that court in the case at issue here and in more than 20 others, his application for admission had been denied, which is also known as the denial order, which is exhibit number 7. He was also instructed to attach a copy of the denial order to any subsequent application for admission in this particular case in the SDNY. Faced with his inability to comply with the judge's order in the case against Mr. Carter and facing the threat of punishment by the court, Buzbee dispatched Fortney to Alabama to meet with Doe that same day, namely February 13, 2025. During that meeting, Fortney falsely, maliciously, and manipulatively told Doe that the case against Mr. Carter needed to be dismissed as Mr. Carter had made threats against Doe's life and it was too dangerous to continue with the case. Of course, no such threats had ever been made. Rather, Buzbee and Fortney were desperate to withdraw the false case or face punishment in court for their actions in filing a false pleading without Buzbee even being admitted in the SDNY, jeopardizing their ability to continue with the more than 20 other cases they had pending in SDNY. Thus, on the evening of Friday, February 14, 2025, Doe quietly filed her voluntary dismissal with prejudice. But the threats and extortion did not end with the dismissal of Doe's fraudulent lawsuit. Rather, on Friday, February 28, 2025, after Doe admitted all of the foregoing and after Buzbee became aware of those admissions, a prominent New York attorney serving as Buzbee and Fortney's co-counsel called an attorney for Mr. Carter. During that call, Buzbee and Fortney's New York co-counsel threatened that if Mr. Carter's attorneys filed anything in Mr. Carter's pending extortion and defamation case in California against Buzbee related to the statements made by Doe, fully exculpating Mr. Carter and inculpating her and Buzbee for extortion and conspiracy, that Buzbee would issue a public statement by Doe that she, for one, was being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit, and for two, dropped the lawsuit only because she was afraid for her life, and that the allegations against Mr. Carter in the dropped lawsuit were all true. Of course, Doe's allegations about being harassed by Mr. Carter's people since she dropped the lawsuit and about her reasons for dropping the lawsuit are and always were false. When Doe, Buzbee, and Fortney and their New York co-counsel said they knew or could readily have discovered through any reasonable inquiry that these statements were false. Thus, the threats of extortion and further defamation continues to this day, necessitating that Mr. Carter take action to prevent unscrupulous actors from further preying on him. This is Jay-Z's prayer for relief. Wherefore, Sean Corey Carter respectfully prays for judgment and relief against Jane Doe as to all causes of action, and Anthony Buzbee, David Fortney, and Anthony G. Buzbee LP, which is his law firm, as to the second and third causes of action as follows: an award of assumed and actual damages in an amount to be determined by the finder of fact, an award of punitive damages, reasonable costs and legal fees pursuant to applicable law, pre- and post-judgment interest as applicable, and any other relief the court deems just and appropriate. Jay-Z is also requesting a demand for jury trial. Mr. Carter demands a trial by jury of all issues so triable. Now, what a lot of these grubby, money-hungry attorneys were trying to do was use the Gender Motivated Violence Protection Act, which gave a 2-year look-back window. However, it closed on March 1st, 2025. Now, it allowed survivors to file lawsuits for S-abuse and S-assault regardless of how long ago the incident occurred, and the look-back window was a temporary measure that provided survivors with more time to file claims. Now that the look-back window has ended, I would like to know what type of strategy these attorneys would use to try to dig in pockets now. This particular Jane Doe story fell flat on its face as soon as she went on TV talking about what happened, and her story did not add up. Buzbee went into this game really strong, having all of these lawsuits against Diddy, but honestly, with things like this happening, I don't really know if any of those lawsuits really hold any weight. He claimed to have top-notch investigators and police officers investigating each story, but the fact that this girl was able to make it through, and this was the big story that you decided to use against Jay-Z, and it fell flat, it has me questioning all of your cases, and unfortunately, that is not fair to the real victims. What I need to do is hear from you. What do you think about everything going on between Buzbee and Jay-Z? Leave a comment and you know how we do. We'll talk about it down below. Talk to you guys later. Bye. As always, thanks for watching. But before you go, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and hit the bell so you don't miss out on any of my new episodes.